Hello, and thank you for having a listen to this week's episode of Secure Insights with NDK Cyber. So, as many of you may know, NDK Cyber is first and foremost a cybersecurity recruitment company recruiting cyber talent on a global basis, entry level through to leadership and all the weird and wonderful skills in between. And we do this for vendors, for services organizations, and of course, end users as well. Now, the Secure Insights series was set up as a way to shine a light on important areas, as a way to tackle hot subjects in the industry at the moment, and really to give people voices with good stories to tell. So this week I'm very pleased to be joined by John Scrimsher, who is the CISO for Kontoor Brands. This week we talked through many different points, including the role of the CISO in the modern landscape, how this integrates with board reporting and presenting, how we look at integrating cybersecurity into the business as a whole, talking through business risk and not just technical risk. We also tackle challenges when hiring, common stumbling blocks here, how to build effective teams, and do we really need to hire people from security-centric backgrounds? Also, we finish up on how to build a successful security culture across the business, what this actually means, and how to get there. So, very excited to share this content with you this week. Feel free to rate, review, subscribe, and above all else, hope you enjoy the episode and open to feedback as always.
Well, John, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Not at all. Welcome to the podcast. So, for those that haven't seen your background or know you from previous, are you okay to give us a brief overview of your background, what you do, and where you're at?
Sure. I'm John Scrimsher. I am the global CISO for Kontoor Brands, better known for our major jeanswear brands, Wrangler and Lee, as well as Rock & Republic and some other sub-brands out of there. I've been doing cybersecurity for approximately 30 years now, working with companies such as Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, General Motors, as well as a small startup for a while. So been in the game for a while and seen a lot of things.
Certainly so. Yeah, I caught that from your background as well. It's sometimes you see guys and girls that maybe start with a HP or a General Motors and sort of stay in that lane, so to speak. No pun intended with the General Motors piece there. But they sort of stay in that industry and they bounce around with similar logos in that space. But you've gone broad.
Yeah, my philosophy is that security knows no specific industry. It's all about protecting of data. So whether you're in healthcare, financial, automotive, big tech, whatever, the concepts are all the same. And so that's kind of what I've tried to do with my career as well, is show that a good security professional is very versatile and can work across all the different verticals.
Mm. And this is a slight side tangent here. I know we've got a few topics you want to delve into, but I guess having worked in like the different industries as you have, do you feel that benefits you as opposed to maybe somebody who's just stayed in financial services, for example?
I think it does benefit me. I mean, there's always the different philosophies between, do you go deep or do you go broad? I tend to like knowing a little bit about a lot of things so that I can speak to more, and it helps me get a more rounded view of things. So I can look at things from a slightly higher level and kind of understand the concepts, at least, that are touching on all the different areas. And it helps me as a leader to put two and two together a little bit better and guide the team. I've got some excellent resources that work for me that can go much more in depth when we need to. But having that broad knowledge across all the different spaces helps me kind of just really drive with the business how we fit into everything else.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And so the CISO shoes then. So how long have you been in the CISO role, so to speak?
Let's see. I've had a CISO title now for approximately 8 years, I believe.
Okay, cool. And in that 8 years, I mean, I've been in the cyber recruitment space for about 10 or so and seen a lot of changes just from the recruitment standpoint alone. So you must have seen that CISO role in the last 8 years. That must have changed and developed quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I've been kind of putting together my view of the history of the CISO over the past 30 years. But yeah, just in the past, let's say when I add in what the time at the startup is probably closer to 11 years. But anyway, you're right. Over the past 10 years, the role has changed drastically with all the new SEC guidance and the different ways that CISOs are being held accountable. It's very much evolved from the days of the network administrator becoming is the security lead to now it is a full-fledged executive that has to have broad business experience as well as deep technical experience to really kind of manage that relationship between IT and the business.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think from where we're asked to recruit people from, it's exactly that. It's no longer we need a CISO with a background in application security, for example. It's so broad across many different areas. So in your view, what is I guess the modern CISO? What's that role look like for you? I know you've touched on a few points there.
Yeah, the modern CISO is someone who still has a strong technical background, but they have to have a just as strong business background. So they're likely to have either an MBA, or they have had experience across the rest of the business in some ways. They've maybe worked in manufacturing, they've worked in business operations or other areas, but they have to have that strong management skill set. The modern CISO is really about asking the right questions and driving the solutions across the entire business, building relationships with the CEO, relationships with the CFO and the chief legal counsel, so that they can really kind of meet the needs of the organization better. As opposed to the old CISO was just effectively running security operations within the IT organization. The new one has to say, my team is going to run those operations and maybe do the engineering and architecture of security, but I need to look at what are the challenges with HR? What are the challenges with the retail environment? Or if you're in the automotive, then your telematics environment and other spaces there. Is there a product security aspect of the role? Is there an e-commerce aspect? And do you understand all those different things and how they all work together to fit into the corporate strategy so that you can ensure you're driving your security program towards that corporate strategy rather than your own individual strategy?
Understood. And you touched on the point there around building relationships with fellow C-suite individuals, CEO, CFO, and what have you. Now, I guess from an outside-in perspective, maybe someone who didn't know security, you would sort of think, well, surely the CEO wants to have a good relationship with the CISO. Surely that's a given that would just be the case anyway. And I know there are companies out there that get that right, and there's good people in the space, but there are probably a lot of people listening that would say, yeah, I've seen it where the CISO is maybe seen as just like an expensive business function because the relationship isn't quite there.
And yeah, that's very much what we've seen across the industry. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a great relationship with my executive leadership team, but I speak to I'm a member of several different CISO groups. And as I speak to a lot of my peers, I'm finding other companies where the CISO doesn't report to the board on a regular basis. Maybe the CIO handles that instead, or the CISO doesn't have a relationship with the CEO, or and those are the companies that you hear about that have they have really bad hygiene in general because their CISO is not getting that visibility. And so that's where the part of the job of the CISO is to understand, how do I get that relationship? How do I make myself show value to the business so that the CEO and the CFO and the COO and what other C titles are out there are coming to me asking for my advice. So that's really a lot of it is the CISO needs to take that initiative and show that they have the knowledge and the expertise to share, and then people will start seeking them out.
I see. And when it comes to showing that value, this is going to be a very broad question, and I know there's no silver bullet, but is there a sort of a methodology perhaps, or maybe an example or two where you can draw upon of showing that value to help get people on side?
Oh, that's a tough one. It takes time is the big part. A lot of it is, you start off with little lunch and learns to kind of show awareness to the organization. You develop solutions that fit the strategic needs. One example of something that I've done at one point in my career, and I've done it a couple times now, is working with the business on sensitive projects. So maybe they're doing a new brand release, or they're designing a new car, or they're planning an acquisition or divestiture, or whatever the sensitive project is, helping them identify what are going to be the risks with that beyond the technical risks. There's helping them understand the risks of the insider threat problem, and the risks of employees that maybe are disgruntled and are leaking data to the press. I had one employer many years ago that was a huge problem. Employees were constantly leaking data to the press. And so the leadership team had taken to a strategy of actually lying to their employees so that the data would leak out and the press would get the wrong information. So I try to work with the teams now to understand what's the likely psychological impact to employees, and how can we as a security team address that, whether we're using DLP or other solutions to monitor what employees are doing and identify where those risks are. once I can do that and show that value for those sensitive projects, then management starts going, well, wait a minute, if there's those types of risks there, do they exist in these other areas? And they start coming to me and asking more about those types of things.
Understood. And we spoke before this call, I know. So this is all about translating how you can help a business scenario, something that with a dollar figure attached to it, I guess.
Yes,
Or
frequently a lot of
reputation or-
businesses,
yeah. So
a lot of fall to the fallacy of, well, we just make widgets. So why do we care about security? We just make widgets. We're not a target. But the reality is, if you're in business, you don't make widgets, you make money. Widgets are just a way to get to that money. And helping the business understand that our job is not to protect, the product, which that is part of it. Our job is really to help protect the financial independence of the company and the ability of the company to continue making money.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this earlier, that CISO might report to CIO and the CIO reports to the board. And again, the SEC ruling changes and there's all sorts of movements happening at the moment that will, from my perspective, have changed the CISO's relationship with the board when it comes to reporting and presenting. From your experience, are you looking at anything in particular here when you're presenting to the board or reporting to the board? What have you found works? What doesn't work? What's the I guess the John playbook on this?
Well, my general philosophy on any presentation is that every presentation has to have be treated like a 3-act play. And for my board presentations, I like to go with the first act is education. What is happening in the news? Why is that something that's important to my board? How does it impact our company? What are we doing to address it? Those types of things. So I start off, the first act is all about education. Second act is the KRIs, the key risk indicators, the general dashboard of what are the risks, how do we score with our progress towards it. And then the third act is what's coming down the pipeline. Where do we see in the next quarter that the board should be expecting me to report on next time? Where are some challenges we're having, maybe some great successes we're having? What are some future projects, future risks that we perceive? So like right now, it's all talking about AI. Previously, it was about the metaverse. There's always that kind of prognostication piece of the job of trying to predict where the industry is heading and starting to educate the board on what are some of the concerns that they should start researching as well, so they can come back to me with more informed questions.
Understood. And I was going to say, I've jotted down the 3 steps here, and the education piece for me, having spoken to a lot of people in the space, it sort of screams out as the board aren't cybersecurity professionals, often having nothing to do with it really, and it's sort of a footnote sometimes. So the education piece there seems extremely important to get people on side.
It is. It's very much trying to, as you said, the boards typically are not cyber professionals. So they know the business. They may know supply chain management. They may even know some IT, but they're really financially focused. And so one big part of it is my own education. So I will make sure that I check all the latest news sources that they're likely to be watching, whether it's 60 Minutes or Forbes magazine or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. I check there for whatever the latest headlines are within a week of the board meeting, and make sure that those are most likely going to be the types of questions they're asking me is, hey, I saw this thing on TV, or I saw this in the journal. What do you think of this? And so I try to make sure that I'm prepared for those meetings by checking those news sources as well. But then I also try to educate them on, you may have seen this in the press, and here's what it means to us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought that, I guess people would sort of flick on the news in the morning and then come into a board meeting with, John, what are we doing about it? I'm guessing it's covered, and it's often a retort of, don't worry, we've got it covered. But those are the sorts of things you're faced with. Yeah.
If you watch, CNBC, you're going to see information about CrowdStrike and what their stock is doing. The board may ask questions about incident response based on that. You're going to see information about the recent breaches that may have occurred at large corporations. Most recently in the news is Change Healthcare. So you're going to see things like that. And so I always try to remember to get those snippets and be prepared for any questions.
Got it. And say if there's a recent attack, or there's something that we've seen this out there, we need to address this now, and for that you might need some time, some resource, some leverage somewhere in the organization. In your experience, has it been a case of, look, there's an attack here that happened to XYZ organization over here, we're a little bit open to that unless we do X, can I have some resource or money for X? Is there a lot of pushback on that, or does that tend to be meet in the middle to a degree?
Well, so that's not typically a question I take to the board.
Okay.
So that's a question I have with my CEO and CFO, et cetera. But yeah, after every major breach that we see in the news, especially if it's of a similar industry or a similar company, I do a threat briefing with the executive team on this is what happened, this is what we know, because of course, we're not necessarily privy to all the details, but this is what we know based on the public information. And these are the indicators of compromise and all that stuff. Based on what we know, this is how it would have impacted us if we had no controls in place. This is the possibility or the likelihood that it could have impacted us. And here's the things that we need to do to ensure that likelihood is reduced even further. And so we'll go through that. And there's typically, 2 to 3 items, usually not a whole lot, but there's usually 2 to 3 items that we could always improve upon that we learn from every breach that we read about. Go to the board or go to the executive leadership team. And, in most cases, they're sufficiently surprised. I won't use the word scared or fearful, but they're sufficiently surprised at what happened to the other company that they generally want to make sure that we're not going to be that next headline. So that it's usually a very easy conversation to have.
Yeah, understood. And some people I've spoken to before have sort of said that the sort of the fear and uncertainty and doubt, the FUD methodology might work to a point, but it's not a long-term fix. You can't just go in there and harp on about how we're open here and there and it's the world's going to end.
I think a healthy dose of fear is good. We all have to have that.
We'll flip that up. A healthy dose of fear is good.
Yes, yeah, a healthy dose of fear is good. I have to have a healthy dose of fear, otherwise I get too overconfident. I have to be always kind of paranoid that what we're doing isn't good enough. And I want to instill with my leadership team that it's always good to have that healthy dose of, I'll say, paranoia rather than fear. But I do not want them to have any doubts. I want them to have confidence that we know where the risks are and that we are working and doing our due diligence to reduce the likelihood of realizing those risks.
Yeah, okay, cool. And I guess next 6 to 12 months, do you see the relationship with CISO and board further developing, further changing?
I do. I see in the next 6 to 12 months, with the new SEC guidance, the DOJ activities against certain CISOs, things like that. I think boards are going to start asking more questions and more informed questions. I think that the press is making cybersecurity a major headline across all the different news sources out there. And so they're going to start questioning things, and it's going to make it better, honestly. I think some CISOs are going to be challenged because they're going to get questions that they weren't expecting or that they may not be prepared for. But in many cases, it's going to allow the CISOs much more opportunity to shine.
Yeah, that's cool. But here's to that. I think we're all wearing the same jersey, so hopefully, that pulls together. So a conversation we had before around hiring. There's a lot of, I guess, press or media out there around skill shortages, skill gaps. We can't hire cybersecurity quick enough. How do we address this? Take your pick. And there's some big numbers associated with that as well. 3 million vacancies in the US or whatever it might be in cyber at the moment. What's been your attitude to hiring, to, I guess, building strong teams in cybersecurity?
It's trying to find the right people. So I don't know that we necessarily have a shortage of people trying to get into cybersecurity. There are plenty of people applying for the jobs. The problem we really do have in the industry is that skills gap. And we have a huge focus on people. When you go to most universities, they teach cybersecurity, they focus really on the incident response capability, the cyber defense, the SOC people. They don't put enough focus into security engineering and architecture or GRC programs, governance, risk, and compliance, and doing those types of functions. And because that's where we really need people. SOC analyst is great. You're monitoring the threats and you're identifying the threats coming in, but you can be much more proactive if you have a good security engineering and architecture team who are able to help the IT organizations better design systems before they even go into place. And that's where we see a lot of the skills gap, as well as over on the GRC side with testing the controls and being able to not have as deep a technical skill set, but being able to know how to test controls or how to work the projects across the organizations to make sure everyone's aware of where they're going to need to be compliant versus secure and everything. So there's lots of different ways to address that. So a lot of things like what I do is I look a lot at what what do I need to accomplish and what type of personality best address that accomplishment. So in some cases, it'll be a highly technical person, and where I may need someone who's got the technology skills and can design an IT system. But in many other cases, I need analytical skills, or I may need a game design skills. If I'm hiring for training and awareness, for instance, I want somebody that knows how to do user engagement. So marketing skills or game design or other types of things that are focused on the person rather than the technology. That's what I'll look for. So it really is just trying to identify that. And I think if you expand out what you're looking for to be focused on what the end goal is, it really opens up the room a lot more.
Yeah, I think massively. I think from this is where I can maybe also chime in a bit with recruitment. It's not always apparent from the resume or the CV that this person actually has a wealth of application security or product security. For me, it's been a big one over the years. Of a software engineer will often have security baked into them to some level. They may even be a hobbyist in the sort of security or have some red teaming knowledge or whatever it might be. It'll be there somewhere. But I think from a resume standpoint, and if you're matching to the untrained eye, maybe a software engineer for an application security role, there's a lot of differences there. But if we can, I guess, like you say, look for where we can draw these skills from to make them transferable, at least a little bit of the skill gap will be then eased. So is that what you're hinting at there or getting into?
Yeah, I mean, what I try to do is, so every person I meet in life in general, I always try to gauge what their capabilities are, and then I explain to them how their skill set would translate to cybersecurity and try to convince them to come into the cybersecurity world. I've met bouncers at a nightclub that make excellent cybersecurity professionals later on in life. I've met philosophy majors in college who go on to make fantastic privacy managers. It's, for the SOC with analysts, hiring history majors or anthropology majors, people that are used to sifting through lots of data to try to understand things, work really well in those roles. So just being open to it and talking to them and helping them understand that cybersecurity and security in general is already something that's ingrained in their life. How do they translate it to the cybersecurity space in the corporate world is something we can always teach. And so that's where we get into how do you drive culture across security and across an organization and across I hate to say the world, but across your own life. How do you drive security in the culture? And I point out to people that they already practice most of what we do in cybersecurity on a daily basis. And once they realize that, then they're much more open to talking about, oh, maybe I could do cybersecurity then. Once you kind of break through that initial misunderstanding or doubt piece, and then you can start moving them over into the world and help fill those skills gaps.
That's awesome. And like to put it as, I mean, I use a software engineer coming into application security, but you've taken that a step further and gone philosophy majors, bouncers, doormen, and things like that, which is, that's again not a natural leap. And I think you wouldn't think it to be anyway. So I guess what's a sort of a typical conversation or a pushback you'd have from, I don't know, a bouncer? You could do cybersecurity, you could transition into this world. From my experience, it's been conversations like, well, I'm not technical, I know nothing about that. I don't know if you get a similar vibe.
And yeah, my answer there is you're not technical, but you're psychological. You know how to look at a person and identify whether they're a potential threat or not. So you're already in that mindset of how do you identify risk? How do you measure the risk? What is the likelihood of the risk? What's the potential impact based on the things that you have observed? And that's really all we're doing in the cybersecurity world as well, is we're looking at the information we have in front of us, and we're trying to determine whether there's a likelihood of impact or what's the potential velocity of the threat, all those things that go into it. So just taking what they're already doing on a daily basis and translating it into the IT world, of the cyber world, is a very small leap. And so you start talking about this, maybe if they already understand the psychology of a person, well, maybe you can get them interested in learning about the psychology of an adversary from a cybersecurity perspective. and they can then help you better define your protective controls, because maybe you use the MITRE ATT&CK framework or whatever. They can help you identify who your threat actors are, who are the likely ones for your type of business, and then how do you tailor your controls to fit that threat actor.
So all they're doing is they're transferring their psychology from outside of a bar or inside to inside of a corporate machine or an enterprise, whatever, you know?
I mean, the things we do in cybersecurity really are the same things they did in medieval times. It's all about how to identify the threats and develop the right protections.
That's fascinating. That is really fascinating to sort of to go to that extent. And so, a point you touched on earlier around the educational system often focusing on the sort of SOC or security operations side and not maybe as much on GRC or security engineering. I don't really know why that is, but I've seen a similar sort of pattern here and there. Have you got any thoughts on why it's set up that way, or?
It's sexy. I mean, honestly, to get the students in there, that's the part that when you watch movies, they always show the hackers and the blue team detecting the hackers and trying to stop them and all that.
The massive room and the eye in the sky, and yeah.
Right. So I mean, that's the sexy part of security, and that's the part that everyone kind of gravitates towards. That and penetration testing. So if you can be a pen tester, great. But that's once again a very special skill set, and there's multiple different types of pen testers when you get into physical versus the website penetrations or things like that. So I think that's really why universities do it. That's the demand from the students. There's less demand for the other roles. I've met a couple universities. I honestly can't remember which ones they are, but I've met a couple universities that are trying to address that. Maybe in their business school, they may have an audit piece that gets more into the GRC side. I actually guest lectured at a university for a little while, specifically in an audit class for that. In some of them, maybe in some of the IT aspects, the more technology focused schools, they're starting to talk a little bit more about how to make secure solutions, but I don't think they're quite going far enough yet.
That's interesting, and you're right. I think the sexy piece is that's been my sort of philosophy. It's what you see, you can be. If you're around a load of people that don't work in technology and IT and work in construction, for example, that's your natural sort of, well, that's what a job is type thing. But if it's vice versa, it's the other way around. Then I think, the media and what's the series and Mr. Robot.
Yes.
And all that good stuff. It looks sexy. Yeah, I get that. Fair enough. But with the more engineering, or what you touched on it there, the business and the audit, perhaps relatable educational schemes and courses, do you think there'll be is there room on these courses to bring in maybe a cybersecurity module at some point, or to minor in it maybe, and sort of half build a bridge that way, and sort of
I think there is, and I know there's some universities that are looking at how to build an actual a more fuller fledged cyber program that addresses all of those aspects. I haven't seen many out there yet, though. There's as I said, I've heard of a couple, but not a whole lot. There's a lot of room. I think there would be a great opportunity to expand on, I think like the Cornells and I'm trying to think of a few of the other major universities that have certificate programs. If they were to expand on the certificate programs to make them full-fledged bachelor's or master's programs around cybersecurity management, and not just the red teaming piece or the blue teaming piece.
Food for thought, yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely room there, I think, to play around with it a little bit. Just of 100 students, you might get 2 that it catches their eye and say, "Oh, this cybersecurity thing's pretty cool, eh?"
I think honestly, there's a great opportunity if they were to do a blended MBA cybersecurity role, because that for the CISO focused people, or the directors and senior directors and VPs of security, the more executive focused members of the security team, I think would really benefit from that kind of blended program that was really focused on teaching them the business aspects while driving the cybersecurity mindset.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because then in 10, 15 years down the line, we'll have a cohort of people that truly understand the business side as well as cybersecurity. And this transition we're going through now maybe won't be as needed, but that's cool. And so you mentioned this earlier, John, around security as a culture. And so what did you mean by security as a culture in an organization?
It's helping the organization kind of get to a point where security is no longer a part of the conversation, which is it's not a part of the conversation because they're just living it. They're just doing it. And, I kind of equate it to what's the last thing you do when you leave your home? You check the locks, you check to make sure the door is locked. That's a security thing. And you don't talk about it, you don't think about it, you just do it. And so helping your organization get to that point where it's just natural to look at something and go, that's a risk. What should we do about it? That's what I think makes a good CISO, is when you can get the organization thinking that way. So, there's lots of ways to do that. A lot of it's based around your training and awareness program.
Okay.
Do you do frequent phishing tests? How are your phishing tests designed? Are they leveraging the standards things you get templates from the phishing test companies, or are you tailoring them specific to your environment? One thing that my team does a great job of is they look at what type of phishing emails actually make it past our filters, and then they use those for training employees. So we're able to kind of identify the real world examples that are making it past the filters that are out there, use those as templates, train the employees with those, and that has raised awareness greatly with our employees, and they're able to then quickly identify potential risks and either report them to us or just flat out delete them.
I see. And you raised that point there on reporting. Now, I've spoken to a few people over the years, especially 5-10 years ago, that if they did, security would find out, maybe 6 months down the line that someone clicked on something but was too concerned to report it for fear of losing their job or embarrassment or something like that. Do you put an emphasis on it's okay, it's an open culture, we need to know about these things?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, is that people need to know that it is safe to report it. There's no negative repercussion, and it's only positive. And, security, 20 years ago, or, even 10 years ago, had that reputation for being the group of no, and nobody wanted to hear from the CISO, because if you got a call from the CISO, you were in trouble. And so I try to make sure that that is not the case, is that, as a CISO, we should always make it feel that we're always there to help. And so people need to know that if they're going to report something, that they are helping me to help the company. And so, showing gratitude to the business and to all the users, it goes a long way to kind of building that knowledge that they're able to speak up and do their part to help the company move forward.
Yeah, understood. And what do you make of getting other business areas involved? I've heard people talk about it from a HR perspective, or even CEO or other business areas helping drive cybersecurity. So it's not just coming from one source on the phishing, for example.
I think that's critical. I mean, because if it's only the CISO talking about it, then the business, you haven't got the culture across the company. You may have it within your organization, but it's not across the company. So having the head of HR or the CFO or others actually speak out about cybersecurity is a very important thing. I've partnered with different executives throughout my career for that type of thing. Whether it's HR sending out a note and driving security as part of the required training, along with ethics and compliance and all the other different trainings that go out. Working with the chief legal counsel on putting out statements about some of the risks that we are addressing, or even the CEO mentioning security as a part of their town hall address, or things like that. Even if it's that one little sentence, that one little snippet, it always feels good to have those leaders expressing those views across the organization.
Yeah, the recognition must be huge, and then it lets everybody know that we are recognizing cyber here. We are on the same page.
Yep.
And you mentioned when we were talking about the skills shortages earlier around like gamification skill sets and things like that. So I'm gathering your awareness goes beyond phishing. Do you get into the virtual escape room type stuff and all the quirkier things that have some good stuff behind them?
We do. So the one thing that I looked at when I was building out our training and awareness program was we wanted to get into gamification. And so one of the best ways to do that is I met a young gentleman that had just recently graduated with a degree in game design. He loved to design board games. He previously had designed escape rooms and things like that. And so I had a long conversation about how do you translate that into cybersecurity once again. And we've taken that concepts, and he's come on board and he's been helping us to figure out how we can improve our training and awareness program, how we can better engage the users, how we can entice people to want to learn about security. through the gamification design. And so that's been, it's a long process. It's, we're not at 100% where we want to be yet, but we're making great progress towards that. And so that gets back to, as I said earlier, with hiring, is always looking at what is it you want to achieve and then getting the right skill sets there for that.
Nice. And what's been the reception of the users and then the results from the users from the gamification stuff?
It's been great. I mean, the user feedback on our training program has gotten much better over the years. We're also always looking at what's the uptake? How quickly do we get people, when we release a new training, how quickly do we get people taking it? And it's gotten much faster. Instead of taking a year to get everyone on board, now it takes a few months. So it's, people actually look forward to some of the security content that comes out now.
Wow. I won't name him, but I had a conversation with a friend about a month ago, and he sent me a photo of what theirs looks like, and it's a very sort of grey questionnaire tick box type thing they have to do sort of once a quarter, I think it is. And he said, "Is it all like this?" And I said, "No, there's loads of really cool stuff out there, but I guess maybe they weren't onto that just yet, but who knows." And with this culture you've got here, you're driving towards this security as a culture. We're on the same page. It's second nature. It might sound really obvious, but the benefits of doing this, I mean, I'm guessing it reduces risk colossally, or reduces.
Yeah, I mean, it engages the entire business in reducing risk. And so it really, what it does is it removes a lot of the human error problems, because everyone is kind of thinking about what are the potential risks, the things that, I'm going to go back to real life, I say real life as opposed to cybersecurity scenarios like pickpockets. I remember one time I was at a store with my daughter, and there was a long line of people in front of us at the cash register. And there was a young mother up in the line ahead of us with a backpack on with all the stuff for her baby. And hanging out of the backpack on an outside pocket was her wallet. And I was so proud when my daughter actually looked at me and said, "Dad, that's a risk. She needs to take care of that." She went over, she tapped the woman on the shoulder and said, "Hey, ma'am, your wallet is here where someone could easily steal it. You might want to move this inside your backpack." So just kind of having that mindset across the business of being able to identify risks really reduces the overall threat footprint for the business from those human errors and omissions that occur.
Yeah, massive. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know we've bounced around a few different topics there, so thank you for fielding the questions I've fired over. But I guess going forward, next 6-12 months, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking at just continuing to improve relationships even further with the executive team. I'm looking forward to seeing what AI is going to do across the industry. There's a lot of new threats that it introduces, but a lot of capability that it also introduces for the business, as well as cyber professionals in detecting those threats. So I'm just looking forward to the understanding everything that's growing and what's doing more. In addition, I'm going back to school myself, so looking forward to finishing out my degree program and continuing my own personal growth.
Awesome. That sounds good. And if someone wanted to get in touch, John, you're on LinkedIn, anywhere else?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, etc. Don't really post a lot there, but periodically do. But LinkedIn is the best place to reach me.
LinkedIn's the way to go. Awesome. We'll chuck a link in the show notes here. So, John, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you, James.